Hi folks, Steven here. So, this is going to be another one of our Pokemon music discussions. This one is a little bit structurally going to be a little bit different. So, as you may know, we've been going through the side games of the Pokemon franchise, starting in the beginning and moving through in North American release order. Well, the game that we had next on our list is Pokemon Trozei. And the music in that game is definitely worth talking about. However, as we'll get into in our actual discussion, the actual structure of the music is mostly composed of very short loops. They're only like 5 to 10 seconds long. As a result, although the production values and whatnot give us some things to discuss, we are going to have a shorter discussion on that end because we're not going to be picking out songs since they're all so short pretty much. There's not a ton to talk about. So in order to make this a full-ish, we'll see if this goes longer, shorter, or what, discussion, what we did with this is we decided to add a sort of longer bonus segment. We will talk about the game itself at the very end of our discussion. But what we wanted to do here is make sure we basically added an extra topic where Ann and I each picked up a song that is related to a Pokemon movie, but not actually in the movie itself. And each of us sort of went through some processes to sort of figure out how it would be used, and we'll have a topic there to sort of round out our discussion. We may come back to this topic, particularly if we ever find out that there were certain songs that were intended to be used but never made it there. That might be something we come back to for whatever reason. There's kind of a limited pool since it does have to have some relationship to the movie. Let's see. Andy, you want to give a quick introduction right here?
Yeah, I'm Anne. I run Pikapi Podcast. It's a Pokemon anime podcast focusing specifically and basically exclusively on the anime. But I go through every episode and talk about character development and life lessons and analyzing it way too deeply than I think the writers ever intended. But it's a lot of fun. And I just recently put out a new episode. Covering some filler in the Hoenn region, so you can check that out when you're done listening to this. Please don't leave this discussion because it's going to be fun.
Yep. We always seeing you getting back on the horse there. So I know you've had a lot of interruptions and stuff, and I appreciate that you still are able to do these. It's I know it's not a small thing for you to to do
so
this,
sorry.
and
I greatly. Like the 15th time I've been like I'm on a comeback. Maybe this time it will stick. I promise. I hope.
There's a saying here, and I'm trying to remember how it goes, but I guess we'll probably move on from there. All right. Well, like I said, we're going to talk about two things tonight. We're going to talk about the music of Pokemon Trozei for the DS, and we're going to talk about adding a couple related, but not actually in the movie songs, to a couple of the Pokemon movies. It'll make more sense when we get there. But generally speaking, this is going to be the same structure we usually do otherwise. You're going to pause. I'm going to do an introduction. We're going to move on from there. We'll also have some feedback to go over for this discussion from some recent things I've put out. And also we'll have a post-discussion where we talk about the game Pokemon Trozei. All right, well, leave a little bit of a pause there, and then let me get my devices started so I can start doing recording, and let me know when you are ready.
I am.
All right, so let's see here. Give this a second to boot up. Okay, our levels look good, I think. Move the gain up just a little shade here on the one that records my voice. Okay. Hi, folks. Steven here. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast, and this time around we're doing something a little bit different. We are going to discuss the music of a Pokemon side game, but this is actually going to be a bit of a double-header discussion because we're adding in a secondary segment where Ann and we've each picked out a song that is related to a Pokemon movie, but not actually in it, and we're going to discuss our ideas for actually putting it into the movie. But first of all, we're going to do our usual Pokemon side game music discussion. As it turns out, we've come up to Pokemon Trozei, or if you're in Europe, you might have heard this as Pokemon Link. And this is a game that was, I guess, a relatively early DS game. It came out after Pokemon Dash, which was the first Pokemon DS game. Let me kind of rephrase that a little bit. But in any case, for our side game music discussion, this time we're going to be talking about Pokemon Trozei. Now, some of you may actually know this is Pokemon Link. This is a DS game that was released fairly early-ish, certainly before the first main games were released for Pokemon on the DS. Let's see. It was developed by Genius Sonority, so these are the same folks behind the Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness games and a few more Pokemon games down the line that we'll probably mention at various points here. Looks like it released in Japan on the 20th of October 2005, so within the first year or so there. And then in North America, it came out on March 6th, 2006. Australia was April 28th, 2006. European Union was May 5th, 2006, and then Korea, for whatever reason, we've seen this before, I think, with Pokemon Dash, they got a very late release in 2007, in May 17th, 2007, which is a bit odd. So, first of all, we'd like to get a little frame of reference here for each of us. Anne, did you play this game back when it came out? How did that happen?
I don't remember that I did it when it came out. I think it was slightly later, because I would have been in college. It's kind of a weird one because I remember I did own it and was kind of into, the very loose little narrative plot. And I kind of enjoyed it a lot because it reminded me of Yoshi's Cookie, which is a game I have as a special place in my heart. But I must not have owned it for very long. I'm not sure if I sold it or re-gifted it or what I did with it, because it kind of... I have a very weird blip in my mind of having it and then it just disappearing from my life. So I'm not quite sure what happened to it. I unfortunately didn't get enough time with it to form a lot of really solid memories. But I remember that I really did like it.
Yeah, I still own my copy, which I'm guessing based on the date I must have gotten around Easter. Maybe I was in college at the time, so I might have bought it with my own money, or I got it as an Easter present. And played through it. It may not be the most substantial game. We'll talk more about the game itself in our bonus segment. But yeah, definitely remember this from back then. And of course, it does have a little bit of a legacy because, of course, there's the sequel on the 3DS, Pokemon Battle Trozei, and then another sequel-ish game, Pokemon Shuffle, on the 3DS and mobile. So this game does have a bit of a lineage, I guess you could say. I don't remember it being a huge to-do about putting it out there, but it was sort of important.
I can remember the commercial for it, like the little jingle.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Since this is a Genius Sonority Pokemon game, it probably will not surprise you if you've listened to our previous discussions that Tsukasa Tawada did the music for this. And I would definitely say stylistically, it definitely fits in with, despite the DS being relatively different sound hardware from the GameCube or Wii or other systems he's worked on, you can kind of tell it is in the similar vein and stuff like that. And I assume you have a similar opinion on that?
Yeah, it's kind of sad that the games, I don't know, the needs of the game, the capabilities of the game, that we don't get more from him. Because we've talked about him before. This was the guy who has the YouTube channel where he just goes nuts on the piano. He's very talented, and I think we were both pretty impressed with stuff we've talked about him composing before. So kind of a shame, but what is there is good.
Yeah. So the actual music in this game definitely feels like it has sort of a blend of a lot of electronic / technical. I don't want to say techno, but more more technical stuff combined with some definite jazz elements in there. And is that sort of if you had to peg this with a genre, is that what you'd say?
If I could, yeah, I would kind of put it in there. I'm definitely feeling a lot of jazz vibes. Again, I'm just kind of a sense of somebody who composes with a lot of instruments, who can compose in a classical style with a lot of different motifs and things. Like just everything feels very full and not like just one keyboard and a backing bass line.
Yeah, and I guess those genres make a certain amount of sense. The game, you alluded to the story a little bit. It does have sort of a spy motif in there. You're with Team Sol, SOL, and you're going against the Phobos Battalion or something like that. So having sort of electronic as well as some jazz elements or maybe some of the more sneaky stuff kind of does make sense. But as those of you who play this will know, the music in this game is not a particularly huge soundtrack. Let's put it that way. If you look up this soundtrack on YouTube or something, there are complete OST videos that take about 8 minutes. Pretty much all the game's music consists of very short loops, and found that very interesting. I have some theories about that. One of those is that the loops used in this game kind of remind me of in the main series games when you approach a trainer who's about to battle you and you talk to them. They're not a major enough character to have a theme, but based on their trainer class or whatever, they usually have a short little ditty that plays while their text box displays as they're about to challenge you. And did you get that kind of vibe from some of the music in this game?
Kind of, yeah. It's hard to say just because, again, there's not a ton of it. But yeah, like just that kind of a real little burst of music to really quickly convey whatever the situation is, whether it's we're about to start a battle or, a really quick little flitter of music to evoke the mood. It's kind of got that kind of a vibe to me. It's just like quick, put you in the place, and then we're done.
Yeah, the main games do that. I think they still do up to this day, where they have, like, depending on if you're encountering a hiker or a lass or one of the evil team members or something like that, there'll be a short little ditty that plays before the battle starts as they, either spot you, but while their text box is going on. And the reason I wanted to bring that up, besides just being a general observation, is if I recall correctly, with the exception of characters who have actual themes, that's not something that exists in Colosseum or Gale of Darkness. If I remember correctly, what happens there with most of the regular trainers, either you'll just talk to them straight away if they're not someone who challenges you as soon as they spot you, or if they are someone who spots you and then challenges you, you'll hear a little... I'm not sure how to describe it. It's sort of a little bit of a beep sound, and then like a little white mark appears above their head to say, "Aha, I see you." And I'm wondering if it's possible that some or maybe a lot of the music that was used in Trozei might be left over from the development of Colosseum and XD, and maybe in an earlier version they expected to have these types of short tunes when you encounter someone. And I am honestly kind of grasping there, but do you have any thoughts?
That's a really interesting possibility. I mean, one of those things that you and I will probably never know for sure, but like that brings up some interesting thoughts about maybe directions they were trying to go with Colosseum, and maybe the way that, as you said, the little ditties play depending on which trainer you encounter now. Like maybe these ideas have evolved from previous games, starting with ideas that maybe didn't work in Colosseum but worked in Trozei, and now they're bringing it to another game, kind of a thing.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. I didn't, try to contact Tsukasa, who is a little more in contact with some of the fans than some of the other folks, but it is an interesting hypothesis. I mean, there's certainly other possibilities. It could be that these were like some ideas that Tsukasa started on but couldn't generate a full, multi-minute tune from, and they decided to use these. It's also entirely possible that, this sort of blended in with the development of either, Gale of Darkness or Pokemon Battle Revolution for the Wii, and they maybe originally planned to do something that was had longer tunes and stuff, and this is about what they had time for. It is tempting to sort of map some of the songs here. Once I started thinking, well, maybe these were trainer introduction tunes before the battle starts. Let's see if I could map these to various things, because XD and Gale of Darkness, they have some obviously Western qualities, but there are a lot of high-tech places, and even a few sillier characters that some of the songs in Trozei might work with. So I don't know, Anne, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't have much to add to it, just that I agree.
Yeah,
sorry.
Kind of just throwing that out there. If nothing else, it would be interesting to try that, even if they were never intended in that regard. All right, well, although we're not doing like any full picks in terms of like we're not each picking out 3 songs like we normally would, just because they are so short, I did want to mention they do try to some of the tunes and some of the characters. Like there's a bit of a weird one for Mr. Den. There's a lot of electronic stuff. And just briefly mention 1 or 2 of the tracks there without going too far, since it's mostly not material.
Yeah, 1 second. Sorry, you cut out a little bit there. You asked me to just list a couple of the tracks that I liked, right?
Yeah, much, and then just maybe 1 or 2. There's not a ton of material there. We can't really go in depth, which is sort of the
right. Yeah.
Here, but
yeah, a couple that stuck out to me were Panic, and then like that was kind of one, just because I don't know, it just sticks out at you. It kind of gets the anxiety going. They've got a lot of fun characters in this, like with Mr. Who and the Phobos General. So let's see, Phobos Spear Rising was a fun one.
Yeah, so sort of going into our overall opinions, the music here does not lack for, at least based on, let me try it. So just kind of bringing that into our sort of overall opinion, I mean, they did use good instruments, they used good samples. It's just kind of that these are very short loops, and I think that, to be honest, works to the detriment of the game a fair bit. I mean, yeah, the actual stages, with the exception of a few that are really big, the warehouse stages aren't too long, but I still found this to be honestly pretty repetitive there, and it did sort of get on me. I don't know. Anne, did you have thoughts in that area?
I'm on the one hand, the type of game that Trozei is, you have to it's like Tetris in a way. You have to focus really hard. So I'm not sure where things fall for people, whether you want something that's, fun and motivating, but also a little repetitive, or if you want something a little bit more involved to kind of keep your brain loose, I guess. So on the one hand, I understand working with very short loops, but there's a lot of opportunities in the game to have longer, more involved music, and those were wasted, I think. Whether or not the company wanted to devote their resources there is their own decision, but I don't feel like everything had to be as short of a track as it was, and it feels like they composed their music almost entirely based on wanting very short loops for the actual gameplay, is the impression I get.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to be a fly on the wall to find out how this game ended up with the music it did, because, if you listen to the successor games, Battle Trozei and Pokemon Shuffle, they have considerably longer melodies out there. So, not sure if this was a conscious choice, a sort of circumstance of constraints, or a little bit of both. But yeah, so that's kind of the music of Pokemon Trozei. If you have any thoughts, please do give us a comment either on this video, or you can always email us at pokepress@gmail.com. All right, well. Okay, so for our second, I guess you could say, segment here, since Trozei didn't take up as much time as some other games might have, I decided it would be fun to do sort of, usually in between generations, we do these breaks where we come up with a fun topic to discuss, like, disputed Pokemon songs, or pick a band that never did a Pokemon song and pick 3 of their songs that might work as Pokemon songs and stuff like that. I figured since we had some extra time with this game, that we could have a mini topic to go in here. So what I came up with was add a song to a Pokemon movie. Now, I did set some ground rules for this. It had to be a song that was at least in some way associated with the movie, so we're not taking some random song that, whether it did or did not exist at the time, and trying to put it in there, although there may be a little bit of an exception later we'll talk about. But this is usually going to be something that was on the soundtrack to that movie or somehow associated with it. I suppose if we do this again, I might pick something like, can we put Holding Out for a Hero into Detective Pikachu for real instead of just in one of the trailers, and stuff like that. That might be a fun thing. We might also revisit this topic again later if we ever find out that there were certain songs that were considered for the movies but either fell through or rejected for one reason or another. In any event, Anne and I have each picked out a song associated with a movie, and let me rephrase that. In any event, both Anne and I have picked out a song from one of the Pokemon movies, or I should say, gosh, okay, let's try this again. In any event, both Anne and I have picked out a song, and I picked out Making My Way Any Way That I Can, which of course is from the soundtrack to Pokemon, the first movie, but I sort of wanted to try out inserting it into the dock scene of Pokemon, the first movie. Anne, what was your pick?
I picked Orewa Collector. I am a collector from the Revelation Lugia Pokemon 2000 soundtrack, the Japanese version. And I was planning to insert it into the scene where the kids are all captured in his evil floating lair. And he's explaining his plan and his history and sitting at his chessboard and figuring out how to catch legendary birds.
Yeah, so this will actually be pretty fun when we get to talk about some various concepts and involving music and stuff like that. All right, 1 second here. I do have to boot up and share a PowerPoint. Give me a second here. Let's see. It should already be going on. All right, well, we'll start with my choice, which was to attempt to put Making My Way Any Way That I Can into the dock scene of Mewtwo Strikes Back, Pokemon the first movie. All right, so I did make a mock-up of this, but for copyright reasons I can't really share it either live on video here or through the audio stream. If you do track me down at a convention or something like that, I'll try to make sure I get it added to like my cell phone or something like that so I can show it to you. But just to sort of set the scene, so this is the part where our heroes, Ash, Misty, and Brock, are headed over to the dock to catch the ferry to New Island. And then we cut to the inside of there, and this is where you have the chill out, Raticate, Kingler, save your energy, and all that stuff. So we get to see some of the trainers who are already there, and we pan across the area there. And then Ash and company come in there, and they're sopping wet. And like Pikachu actually shakes the water off of him, off of himself. So it's that part. There is a second part to that scene, of course, which is where the characters are told, oh, there's not going to be a ferry. It's been canceled because of the weather. That is not the part I'm concerned about. It's just this first portion here where we get to see sort of the establishing interior of the harbor building or whatever it's called. Okay, so if you don't recall the song itself, Making My Way Any Way That I Can was written by Diane Warren, legendary songwriter, still active today. It was performed by Billie Piper, who I'm guessing some folks out there will better know as an actress. She has a variety of roles, including Rose Tyler in Doctor Who. The song itself has a triumph over adversity theme, and it actually has a fairly long arrangement history. This is not the first version of this song to be published. It was not actually written for the movie, but it does work very well. If you want to know more about the whole history there, I would suggest taking a look at our Disputed Pokemon Songs episode that I published, I think, back in November. We recorded it last summer, and I put the episode out in November of last year. If you want to listen to this, officially anyway, you can either pick up a copy of the Pokemon the First Movie soundtrack or a copy of Billie Piper's Walk of Life album, but it has to be the Japanese version. It sounds very slightly different there, but it is otherwise basically the same song. So I had mentioned I had made a... Let me see. I want to see. Anna, I want to try and give you a chance to talk because I've been going at the mouth like forever there.
You're good. I'm a little surprised that you cut it before they actually get told that there's not going to be a ferry, because the lyrics being, and if the river's too wide, I'll get through it. Seems like that would be the...
Sorry, Anna. Let's rewind a bit so I can hand it off to you more cleanly. And before we get too deep in this discussion of this song, Anne, do you have any sort of first impressions? Like if someone had just suggested this to you, what was your sort of first thoughts be?
Well, definitely I see the potential. Like, it's kind of a place where the trainers are all brimming with, like, excitement and what's gonna happen, and we're about to face a challenge. They've all gotten this invitation to go face the greatest Pokemon master on New Island, and there's high waves and adversity that they must now triumph over. Like, I see that concept. Like, I was a little surprised by like where you decided to end it, because I feel like this song could have propelled it into. So I'm interested to hear you talk about your reasoning why there.
Yeah, so the way I implemented this in the video I made up is I made this what's called source or diegetic music. Basically, I decided the most realistic way to insert this would be if it were like, and this is not an insult to the song, because I think it is very well written, but I think it would also have worked as basically muzak to play over the PA system at the dock building there. And that was sort of the motif I went with. So I sort of spliced it in there. And let's see. So to sort of explain what diegetic or source music is, let me see. I gotta figure out how I'm actually gonna write this one down. So the way I decided to implement this was as diegetic or source music. And what that means in music terminology is that the music itself actually exists within the world of the movie or the TV show or whatever. So, for example, something that would not be diegetic music would be something like, in the first movie would be like the opening theme song or Brother My Brother. Those are songs that we as the audience can hear, but that the characters in there not hear, presumably. Likewise with the actual score of the movie, it's not something they hear. Instead, what I'm doing here is my intention was, and not to insult this song at all, it's a good song, but I thought it would work as if it were being played over the PA system at the dock, sort of as music or something like that. Like I said, not an insult against the song. I really do like it. We talk about it a lot, and that's for a good reason. So in order to make that work in the sort of video that I mocked up, I had to sort of mix it down to mono. I took out some of the low and the high end. And I also tried to get to an appropriate volume and stuff like that. So much so that Anne, the first time she viewed the video I sent her, actually kind of missed the song in there. Because it's not supposed to overpower the dialogue or stuff like that. So, like I said, those are some of the constraints. If you want to learn more about this type of dynamic and stuff, one podcast I recommend, by the way, is called The Soundtrack Show. It's put out by iHeartMedia. And they talk about this in regards to a wide variety of movies they cover. They were about to actually do another part of their Ocarina of Time series. They cover movies, video games, stuff like that. But definitely recommend that one if you want to learn more about some of the mechanical aspects of how score is used in movies and games and stuff like that. All right, well, having kind of said all that, there's actually one little other wrinkle in all of this is actually, I suppose one reason I was okay using this over the PA system there is there's actually a PA announcement in this scene where the whoever's like coming over that says, "Officer Jenny" to the doors or whatever it is. If this were a real PA system, the song would actually have like totally cut out there and then come back once the announcement's finished. But to make it a little more graceful, I did try to just drop it a few decibels. All right, Anne, I've been talking long enough. What are your kind of thoughts on what I put together? We'll go into more details, but what do you kind of think?
Well, that's a really cool idea. Yeah, as you say, the first time I heard it, I actually didn't even hear the music the first time. And when I finally turned it up, I was like, wow, it sounds like it's coming over the intercom. I wasn't quite sure what you were doing, but like that, like hearing you explain it, like that's a really interesting choice to kind of make it grounded in the world of the movie. And yeah, like I'm starting to really kind of grow into it. And you know, it feels like a song that they would play in a Pokemon Center type situation and like something that the trainers would want to hear is songs that kind of pep you up a little and make you feel like you can do anything as you're traveling on your journey. So I'm starting to really come around on this idea. This could have worked in the movie, I think.
Yeah, one of the main reasons I just left it in that first part of this scene is once you get into the second part there, things get a little more serious, and also there's some score elements. This first scene, part of this scene here, has basically no music in it. There's no score. Not to say that there's no evidence, I should make clear, that I've found that says they wanted to put this song in there, or any song in there for that point, for that matter. But I figured it was worth a try. So just to be clear about that. Now, I did actually do a couple different variations to try and put in there. One of them, I started at the chorus where it goes, if the river's too wide, I'll get through it. If the mountain's too high. And it gets into a little bit of the second verse. And then I did a second version where it starts right on the second verse. So many times I played in someone else's game. This time the game has changed. This time I'll make the rules, what we don't always fool, so on and so forth there. And I was, in a way, kind of going for two different things. And I guess I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but I wanted to see, did you sort of catch the difference there, and do you have any thoughts?
Definitely the second version, your joke version that you sent, was a lot more busy. So you noticed the song more, but it also kind of made the dialogue seem a bit, and the setting of the scene seem a bit more background. So my initial thought is, like, there are some movies where, like, having a particular song in a particular scene is, like, a deal, and the song is like a character that the spotlight is shining on. And there are some times where you want the soundtrack to kind of blend into the background and disappear into the ensemble. So I kind of feel like they both of those options have merit in a way. I personally liked the first version a little better, with where you start on "If the River's Too Wide," just because it didn't seem so busy. It seemed to blend into the mood and the I don't know, the rhythm of the music seemed to match a little better the dialogue that was happening there.
Okay, and just to do a little correction there, I'll let you re-say that if you want. So the joke version, sure. The way the video works out, there's 4 versions of the scene. There's one that's just the original theatrical cut. There's one that has Making My Way starting with the chorus. There's the next one has it starting at the second verse. The last one, the joke version, is where I took another Diane Warren song, Blame It on the Rain by Milli Vanilli, and spliced it in. This is going in the outtakes, I can tell.
Yeah.
So that was one I did that was the joke one I did, because apologies, Diane Warren. So fine, Blame It on the Rain is also a good song, but first of all, that song would probably have been too on the nose for that scene, and B, it's already spoken for by another Nintendo video game franchise's cartoon.
Clearly,
so I did that. I did that as a fourth option there as a joke. So do you want to rephrase your answer between the 2 versions of Making My Way?
I will rephrase. However, I would also like to point out that now I think Blame It on the Rain is probably the best choice. Okay,
well, I suppose they could have gotten away with it in the Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution remake. But because it would have been old enough, it wouldn't have been like in '99. It would have been old enough that it was like dated then. Now it's sort of come back around.
Now it's retro.
Yeah. But I will reprompt I'll just re-record or redo some of my thing for there.
Okay.
And give you a chance.
I'll fix it in editing. It's fine.
So the video I sent Anne actually had 4 versions. One was the unmusicized version of the scene. Then there were two versions with Making My Way, and then there was a 4th joke version. I decided as a joke I would put another Diane Warren song in there, Blame It on the Rain by Milli Vanilli. But that's not one we're really considering for this. I just kind of did that as a joke. Also a good song, by the way. But the 2 different ways I used Making My Way, I did one that it starts on the chorus. It starts with, if the river's too wide, I'll get through it. If the mountain's too high, that won't stop this dream of mine. I'm on my way, and so on and so forth. It gets into a little bit, because this is about a 30-second scene or so, some 28, 30 seconds for the whole thing. It gets into a little bit of the second verse. And then the second Making My Way option I had on there was, let's see. Oh, it starts with the second verse. So many times I played in someone else's game. This time the game has changed. This time I'll make the rules, so on and so forth, like that. It has that part of it. And I think they work a little bit differently. And what were your kind of thoughts?
I agree. The first version you did, I kind of felt like the rhythm of the song never seemed to overpower, and the lyrics as well, and just the general tempo and vibe the song gave off. In the first cut you did, it never seemed to overpower the scene that was taking place. The second version kind of stole a little spotlight in a way. It just the nature of where you start and the energy that it's bringing in, it kind of made you pay attention to it a little bit. And I don't think either one is necessarily good or bad, because there are a lot of times in movies where they chose a particular song for a particular scene for a particular reason, and they want it to take center stage. They want it to be a character. Brother, My Brother is probably a good example. That using that song there, they were never intending it to be in the background. Like, that song is playing because they want you to hear the lyrics for Brother, My Brother and extrapolate meaning. So I kind of, like, for me, I think in this scene, the first cut you used just seemed to mesh better with what was happening. But there is definitely a case that, the second cut you did, having a little bit more of a push and energy in the second verse, and the lyrics just hitting you in a way that made you focus on them a little more than the dialogue, which is not terribly arresting at that exact moment in the scene, could also have some merit.
Well, I guess I don't know. I don't feel too bad about putting you on the spot there to try and guess my intentions, but I may as well tell you what they were now. So the first one was supposed to be a little more cheery, where we start on the chorus, and it's supposed to speak more for the trainers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, choosing to go with the second verse is actually, it's still a very cheery song. It's not a down song, but it's supposed to give it a little more subtext, almost as if the song is kind of from Mewtwo's perspective. Because it's like it's sort of recounting its history. You know, so many times I played in someone else's game. You know, I used to be just a thing for other people to tell what to do. You know, this time the game is just kind of supposed to represent. You know, now the trainers are, you know, the rules are kind of reversed from where they are normally in Pokemon, and I thought that gave it not necessarily super ominous. I mean, I wouldn't expect folks to pay too much attention to that until they rewatched it, because, like I said, the music in the way I edited it is not supposed to overpower the scene itself and the dialogue that's happening under. That was sort of the logic behind those two choices.
That's really cool, and it's kind of
and to sort of inform your opinion a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's really cool, and it's a very interesting juxtaposition because, you know, the characters in the scene, like, they all think this is their moment. Like, this is my moment where I'm going to change the game and make it to the top. And really, as you say, it's kind of also giving a little bit of foreshadowing and insight into Mewtwo's character where, no, like, I'm really going to flip the tables. And, like, it just, yeah, it brings a lot of subtext, as you say, to this scene and a lot of nuance to a story that, while it looks simple on the surface, like, there's a lot of very complicated emotions going on in this plot.
Yeah, it's not supposed to, like, totally change that into a really haunting scene or anything like that. It's still a kid's movie, and it's not supposed to make it really scary or anything. It's just really, I sort of intended it as something that fits the scene and might be something, you know, they would maybe miss the song when they originally watched it, but they would pay more attention if they rewatched the movie, and they would get a little more from it. It's one of those value-added type of things.
Yeah,
so,
just gives it a little
like
flavor.
I said, no, yeah. Yeah, any other thoughts? Anne?
I no, that's it. Sorry.
All right. Well, I guess with that out of the way, we may as well go on to your pick. So your pick, Anne, was I Am a Collector. This is from the Japanese album that goes along with the second Pokemon movie, Revelation Lugia. And it's a character song for, well, the Japanese name is like Gilardian or something like that. And in the U.S. version, he's not named on screen, but officially his name is Lawrence III. It looks like this is performed by the guy who did that character's voice in the Japanese version. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the song itself, since it's not as well known as some other things?
Right. So this is an image song, which is a lot more common in Japanese anime CDs than it is kind of for a lot of English soundtracks. But the idea is, like, usually every main character in a popular anime will get an image song, which is kind of sung from that character's perspective, usually by the voice actor in question. And his is kind of explaining a little bit about, like, his mindset and like, I don't know, like, the way that he wants to collect things and you know, other living creatures, other things, like, they kind of just exist to help him move ahead. Like, let's see, like, it's not necessarily in a, like, I'm cold and callous and, you know, the world is my playground, but, like, the idea of, like, I'm not anyone's king, but I'm also not their soldier. Like, I'm forging my own path. Like, I'm gonna pick up all the beautiful things in this world, all the broken things, and I'm gonna put it together and make it pretty again. I'm gonna rearrange things, like composing a musical scale. Like his idea, like, he alone can put the world back and make it pretty, so everybody just get out of his way and let him collect all the stuff and keep them for himself because other people are not smart enough to keep like that kind of attitude. And that's his song. It's sung from his point of view, and it just tells you his worldview.
That's interesting. Can you describe the song stylistically? I did re-listen to it for this discussion, but why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay, so this is, I don't know, like it kind of strikes me as not an opera, but like an operetta. Like it sounds like the number where like they have a quick scene of dialogue and then everything stops and it's very big voiced and like, you know, this, like, it's just it's sung in a very dramatic way. It's not a ton, I feel, going on musically. It's kind of, like I said, that's kind of why I feel like it kind of feels like it should be in part of a play of some kind, because it exists to tell you a thing, but the music itself feels like it's only kind of there to support the dialogue that's going on.
You know, one of the comparisons I made in my notes was Phantom of the Opera, by which I specifically mean, I'm not an expert on it, but like the Andrew Lloyd Webber Phantom of the Opera from like the late 80s or early 90s or whatever it was. It kind of gives me that type of musical vibe. It's got like it's kind of a menacing type of track. A little bit, but not in the most serious way. Like, it's not designed to really scare people so much. You know, stylistically, I honestly think it's kind of a fair bit over the top, and I can kind of see, I don't know if the dub made any effort to try and get this, although part of me would love to have this sung by their first choice for the voice of Lawrence III. They tried to get Patrick Stewart for that one.
Really?
Now,
yeah.
Well, I don't know that I would prefer him as the in-thing voice. I'm sure he would have done a fine job, and he probably, if he could trade it for his role in the Emoji Movie, he would come out ahead. But maybe I'm just used to the guy they actually got for the second movie.
I mean, he is good too. I'm not gonna lie, but
yeah. I don't know, that was a little bit of a jumble of thoughts, I suppose, there. It's very theatrical, and more so than even a lot of the stuff on the English pop album soundtrack. So I guess that covers it more or less stylistically. Where would this actually be used in your mind? You didn't make a mock-up video like I did.
No.
But where do you think this would be used? Would the guy actually sing it in the movie, or?
Okay, so I have two pitches. One is the tame version that the producers will like, and that's where it's kind of playing as instrumental music mostly. Maybe occasionally, if there's a moment of no dialogue where he's just walking, maybe a little bit of the chorus kind of lyrically comes in, but mostly it's just instrumental as he's kind of coming down and from his little elevator thing, and you're seeing these dramatic shots of the ceiling, and he's talking to the kids of, I am merely a collector, and you know, doing all of his evil villain, I'm monologuing and explaining my plan and dramatically looking out of windows and trying to catch the birds. That is a place where I think it could work really well. But my other thought, my slightly more radical thought, was that Team Rocket basically gets a whole song and dance every time they show up. It's really not that out of the realm of a Pokemon movie for a character to just break into a routine. So we'd have to reanimate some things probably, but I would love to have him coming down from his stand with the angels on the ceiling, and he just belts out in his grand theatrical way that he is a collector. And I apologize earlier, I think I've been reading this title wrong. I think it's Warewa Collector, but it means the same thing. Either way, he'd just burst into song and just have a villain moment, and I think it would work perfectly for this movie.
Well, to be honest, I'm a little more down on that second suggestion, just because
That's why I brought
going back to Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution, I was not the greatest fan of the song and performance that the D Viking Team Rocket had in that one. I don't want to say it was the awfulest thing, but it felt like it made it so that it was no better than a lateral move at best. But so I'm not sure how this one would work. I will say the Pokemon Trozei and Revelation Lugia does kind of blur the line between what we talked about earlier, which is, diegetic and source music versus music that only the audience can hear. Because you've got, like in the short, you've got the Dance of the Blossom part in there where obviously the Pokemon voices are in universe, not so sure about the background music. And then, of course, you have the flute playing, which, when Melty plays her flute, it's obviously in universe, but not so much probably the orchestral accompaniment that comes at the climax of the movie. So I don't know about that second idea. I mean, if we go back, I know in the dub that the Collector does have an orchestral theme that goes in there, nowhere near as recognizable as Lugia's, or the dee-dee-dee-dee-dee, which I think is the Chosen or Ash's theme in that movie. But there's definitely a motif that when he appears does come in there every now and again. And I think the Japanese one has that too. So it's an interesting idea. I will absolutely give it that. Anything else you want to stake to your cause or whatever?
Just that, every pitch meeting, every ideas meeting needs at least one person who's going to come in there and say something crazy so that we can find the happy baseline. And I'm happy to be the one who comes in and says our villain is going to sing and dance and, and therefore find a lovely track on our soundtrack where he gets to have his moment.
Well, one other comparison I wanted to draw in all this, sorry this doesn't follow so well from what you just said there, but going back to the lyrics of the song, well, I do think the song itself is kind of, even for the, a children's thing, well, we'll talk more about maybe some of that later, but even for a children's movie, I think that song is kind of over the top, given where Pokemon usually goes with these types of things. However, the lyrics you mentioned there, to be honest, at the time, well, the guy was alive, but definitely nowhere near as famous as he is now. Lawrence III kind of reminds me of like a social media company CEO and the way he sort of brushes off certain consequences, the actions of others, stuff like that. Like, I didn't freeze the ocean over. That was Articuno. He doesn't say that, of course, but you can kind of get the vibe there. He kind of reminds me of Mark Zuckerberg, to be honest. And like when he's testified in front of Congress. I guess it's Pokemon 2000, so we have to get political. But that's like if they ever remake this, I would tell the person to mostly stick to what the 2000 dub did, but see if you can work in a little bit of like, Dorsey or Zuckerberg or Bezos or something like that into the performance there. And some of the lyrics in the song you mentioned about that do sort of fit in there. So maybe not the song itself, but I think there's some elements it gets right about the character, or at least my perception of it, strangely enough from watching the dub.
Yeah, no, they've definitely, for a character that, his name never gets said on screen, and we don't really see much of him further on in subsequent movies. Like, he's a very understated character, but there's a lot of subtlety and nuance and stuff that is very relatable today. And like, I don't want to get all man-hatey on this podcast, but like his attitude is something that I encounter in a villainous way in my world now. And, luckily, I don't got legendary birds freezing up my world, but I think you're right. And like, were they to remake this movie, it's definitely worth considering to try to lean into some of this a little bit, to look at this again and see if there's a way to just bring it out a little more in some way. Because I think a lot of people can relate to having to deal with a person in power with such a mindset.
Yeah, so we'll see if they ever do remake the second movie. And to be honest, I think what you described there would actually be learning a lesson from the remake of the first movie, which I don't think did a great job of tying into sort of the environment and the world it was being released in. But that's a discussion. You can look back at another bunch of our stuff from last year on.
We had some thoughts. You can hear them all there.
All right, well, let's move on to some feedback here. let's see. I think, well, the PowerPoint is not cooperating. Give me a second here. It'll probably catch up in a second. Yeah, but it might also... What is going on here? Okay, let's see here. Let's hit next. There we go. I don't know. Usually I just have to press the right arrow key, and for some reason that didn't work. All right, well, if you have any other ideas of songs that are at least have some relation to a Pokemon movie that you'd like to have actually be in the movie and not just on a soundtrack or in a commercial or a trailer or something, feel free to let us know. And I guess speaking of that, we have some feedback to go over. So a couple weeks ago, I did an unboxing of a CD from Mexico that was a little bit unusual. So, excuse me again. So this is a promotional CD that was released through a pizza chain that's in Europe and Latin America called Telepizza. And it's basically kind of what you expect. It's a Spanish Pokemon CD, and it's got just a couple tracks on it. I did an unboxing, like I said. We have a comment from DDD033 talking about Atrapalos Ya, which I guess is the Latin American Spanish, more on that later, version of Gotta Catch 'Em All. Said I did a good job with English translations, which I will take that. I've never formally studied Spanish, so I don't claim to be all that great at it. And then they have another comment on the same that goes into a little more detail. This is from Nelsatop9X. And he points out that in 2017, they started using the Spain slogan, which is Hatse con todos. Hopefully I said that kind of close to right. Rather than the Latin American. They sort of merged them together. Which he points out, it's not really, they're rather different dialects. It's probably even more different, it sounds like, than the difference between like American and British English or Australian English or Canadian English. Like it's even more different than that, and they just wouldn't use that word in Latin America. They might know what it means, but it's not quite the word they would use. And he also has some more details on Telepizza itself. It's also apparently related to a chicken restaurant, Polo Campero. So if you ever visit Latin America, those are some places for you to check out. But Anne, I wanted to sort of run this by you. You've talked in the past about how there used to be a separate Canadian-French dub. Because not unlike like British American English or Latin American and Spain Spanish, there are some differences between Canadian French and French or France French. Any thoughts on this whole thing here?
I don't think don't quote me on this. I don't think like that particular catchphrase changes. But it's extremely true that French Canadian English and French Canadian French and French French are very different things. To the point that school was it was kind of a contentious subject whether they taught us French French or Canadian French growing up in school. And I definitely know my bilingual friends who went to the French only side of my school had a lot of opinions about that, and definitely noticed when they left when they left the Montreal, Quebec French and traveled to actual France and noticed a lot of differences from the accent to actual word usages. But right now I also work in a Mexican restaurant, and we have a lot of people from various countries in Latin America, and my boss has told me the Peruvian Spanish is very different from Chilean Spanish, and I assume that is the same for, it looks like what our listener here is from El Salvador. I assume it's the same there, where the language can differ widely. I can only imagine how different it is across the ocean in Spain. So that's a thing, and it's fascinating. It's kind of cool language usage.
I suppose. By the way, I'm sure I've seen it somewhere since I have a bunch of international versions of To Be a Master. What is the French equivalent of Gotta Catch 'Em All?
Oh my gosh. Okay, let me Google, because It's been a long time since I've watched it. Okay. I think it's Attrape le tu, or maybe just Attrape tu. I think that sounds more right to me. Attrape tu, but Attrape le tu would be, I think, more correct.
Yeah, and since Gotta Catch 'Em All is not exactly grammatically correct either, so I will certainly cut the French some slack on that one. But yeah, so that's kind of what's there. Just a reminder, if you have comments on this or anything else we've talked about, you can always drop us a line, either comment on this video, or you can drop us an email at pokepress@gmail.com. All right, so we go in North American release order. Yeah, we're going back to Trozei because the game that came out in North America after Trozei is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Red Rescue Team, and Blue Rescue Team. I think I can hear some of the folks at home doing a fist pump.
Yeah. Come and celebrate. You've been waiting for this.
With all due respect to all the other side game music that we're going to discuss and have discussed, there's some great stuff out there, but if I had to pick one sub-series or spin-off series that has the most attention paid to its music, it's the Mystery Dungeon series. So I have wanted to get to this for a while, and we're finally up to it. Now, just to clarify, there were two versions of this game. Red Rescue Team was a Game Boy Advance title. Blue Rescue Team was on the Nintendo DS. The two games actually can link up to each other and exchange some data and stuff like that, but story-wise and stuff like that, they are the same game. Kind of the other interesting thing about this is the only, to my knowledge, Pokemon side game that has a remake. Last year in 2020, they released Pokemon Mystery Dungeon DX, I think it was called. I forget exactly, but it was a DX game. It was a remake of these two games sort of put together with on the Switch with 3D graphics and redone music and stuff like that. So probably lump that into this one rather than doing a separate episode on that in a year or two when we get around to it. But that is our next topic. It's one I've been waiting for a while, and we're finally going to get to it. And I don't know how much experience you have with the Mystery Dungeon series, but you sound fairly excited yourself.
I am very excited. I do like this game a lot.
Yeah. This sub-series is well-liked, and definitely for some reasons, and we'll talk about that. Until then, Anne, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you.
This has been Stephen Reich. All right, folks, thanks. All right, we'll leave a bit of a pause, and then let me just take a look at our time here. So this is going to be about as long as some of our other ones, which is just fine. So I'm kind of glad we did this bonus segment because we actually didn't spend, sorry to the folks at home, we didn't spend all that much time on Trozei. It's got, the music that's there is decently produced, it's just not a ton of stuff. But we're going to make up for that partially. We're going to talk about the actual game. Let me get out of this PowerPoint and boot up my notes. There we go. We do have a few notes on the game. We'll kind of go through that. All right. Maybe give the thing a little... it seems to have caught up. I'm always worried. It seems like I get to run into performance issues either while I'm in PowerPoint or as soon as I leave because it has to redo a bunch of windows and stuff, and that messes things up. So I'm wondering if that's part of it. In any case, I'll do an introduction of our game segment. All right, well, circle around to the first part of this discussion. We're going to talk Pokemon Trozei, the game. So first part I want to talk about is the sort of puddle mechanics, and you had done a little bit of a comparison to Yoshi's Cookie. Now that may not be a super familiar one to some folks, but Yoshi's Cookie is a puzzle game from I think it was on the Game Boy, NES, and Super Nintendo, believe it or not, where your goal is to line up like-shaped cookies to clear them. And the way things work is they sort of loop around horizontally and vertically. It's sort of like if a Rubik's Cube was a square instead of a cube. That's kind of what you get with that game. And I can sort of see that there. Horizontally, things do sort of loop around like that. But Anne, sounds like you had some other things you wanted to say about the mechanics. Why don't you go ahead there?
I'm not quite sure what to say exactly. It's it's deceptively simple because again, it's very much like Tetris or Yoshi's Cookie, where you're kind of just trying to rearrange them to make matches and thus kind of clear your area, and it gets progressively harder. And it's I do like those kinds of games. Like they're just very fun, simple little brain teasers. I do think they didn't take advantage of it being a Pokemon game as much as they could have. Like obviously you're matching up little Pokemon icons, which is cool. But Pokemon being very much a game of type and strategies and things like that, it started to feel a lot more like a matching game. But it was very simple to play. Like, so maybe my criticism has no validation. Maybe adding like type disadvantages and things like that would have made it too complicated.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because actually Pokemon Battle Trozei, which I played a little bit for this just to compare it, and definitely Pokemon Shuffle do have type mechanics in there where you'll either get super effective or not very effective depending on what Pokemon you start the clear with and stuff like that. In fact, I found that the Battle Trozei game was actually mechanically, it's still a tile-based game where things sort of fall in place, but they definitely made some tweaks in that to make it a fair bit different than the original Trozei, which seems very basic by comparison.
Feels like it should have been the obvious choice, yeah.
Yeah, we will eventually get to that game and do a separate discussion. It doesn't have a ton of music either, but at least it does have some full tunes in there. But yeah, this original one focuses, like I said, it's not, things sort of wrap around and stuff, which is not the case in the later games. I did kind of want to talk a little bit about the scoring system in Trozei, this original Trozei as well. Because what happens is you get a certain number of points for clearing Pokemon, but pretty much every stage has a set number you have to clear to finish it, which kind of limits your score there. The way you really make points in this game is either during a clearing session, because you remember you make 4 in a row, and then after that, if you have 3 in a row, those clear, then if you have 2 in a row, those clear. Your kind of goal there is if you can get it to where there are no tiles left in play at the end of that, you get a bonus. And you also get a bonus at the end of the round based on how many tiles are left in playfield. If there are none, you get like 20,000 points. So it's kind of a bit odd there because the actual clearing activity doesn't really net you all that many points, which is actually kind of a little bit important because like getting a certain score on a certain level will earn you a credit you can use at Mr. Who's Den. I don't know, Anne, did you have any thoughts on the scoring system of the original Trozei?
I admit it's a little bit odd. Because, on the one hand, it's nice to just focus on, not like the plot is so incredibly hard or involved, but like, I just clear this and move on to the next thing. But, really, you want to get the high points. So you'd think that the basic mechanics of what you're doing, like that would net you a little more. So I can see why it's not necessarily the focus, but again, it's a little odd. Like I said, it's a fun game, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm not sure, like that could be tweaked, and it sounds like it was tweaked for Battle Trozei. So.
Yeah, a lot of changes there. It sort of ditches the wraparound structure. You're just basically swapping tiles from one space to another. Excuse me. They do still fall down, but, sort of the big thing there is all the points you earn basically equate to damage done to one or more Pokemon. Mm-hmm. So it sort of ties in better there, I think. And because of the way the game is structured, at least the Battle Trozei, the score aspect is more based on your clears and how many you can get in a row and stuff like that, and you're not limited by the number that are in the playfield currently necessarily because of the way that game is structured. We'll go more into that in a year or two when we finally get to the second entry in there.
It's hard not to compare them a little now, but yeah, you're right.
But you talk about some of the... I want to talk a little bit about the progression of the game. Now, it doesn't have the battling aspect so much, but it does have the collecting aspect. One thing your task with doing is to make a clear of any different Pokemon you can throughout the course of the game. Each stage will have a certain set of Pokemon. Yeah, a bit of a structural issue here. Common Pokemon that show up. When you play that stage, and then there's like 3 special Pokemon that I've never really figured out. I'm sure they're subject to it and be part of random that are very rare and hard to catch. And usually you have to combine them with a Ditto, which would act as a card in this game. And as a result, I found I lost a lot of interest when I completed the main game. Like when going back to it, no, I didn't have a ton of interest in the game just because the remaining Pokemon I had to collect were so rare, it just didn't worth it to just hope they showed up. And exactly how gotten and stuff like that. Did you have any thoughts of that nature?
Forgive me if I answer this wrong because you cut out a fair bit during that, but yeah, like I kind of definitely share the frustration of like if you're trying to complete the Pokédex, it's rough. Like this was a game where the last couple you'd be here for a while because they're so rare, and you kind of start to lose a little patience with the game itself because it can be a little repetitive that way. My thing was always like, because I believe the conceit is that you're trying to match Pokemon so that you can save them from the bad guys. So I always got to the end and there'd be like 1 or 2 left that weren't matched. And I always be, oh my gosh, did I not save the Pokemon? So that always struck me as a little bit weird. But as I said, I didn't own this game for super, super long, so I never had a shot of completing my Pokédex, but like, yeah, it was so hard to get the rare ones. And if you were a completist, you'd be playing this game for a long time trying to get the right ones to show up so that you could match them.
Yeah, so that was another, I guess, downer that I had in that one. But despite some of the negative things we've said in this post-discussion segment, just a day or two ago I was over at the local used video game store. And given the current conditions with the a lot more shut-ins and stuff like that, retro game prices in general have been skyrocketing up, as have Pokemon games in particular, probably part because of the 25th anniversary. But I did look through there, and it turns out that Dash and Trozei were priced at the same level. And as many criticisms as I have of Trozei, and to be honest, I'd recommend you get either the 3DS Battle Trozei or Pokemon Shuffle, even though they're mechanically somewhat different. This game is still, I would say, a lot more fun than Dash. I think that's your opinion too, Anne.
Yes, no, I did like this game a lot. Like I said, there's definitely some criticisms and some tweaks that could be made to this original Trozei, but like the general concept is fun. Like it's just a fun puzzle game.
Yeah, and I think there are some things. There are still some rough edges in the later games, but there are definitely also some real improvements there. But not a horrible game by any chance, but it definitely has sort of a ceiling on how much interest I have in it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I'd like to get it again, but my memories of it and kind of what you've been confirming here is like I don't know that I would necessarily keep it and play it forever. So I don't know if there was like a cheap rent it for a weekend or something. I think that might be where my peak enjoyment of it would be.
Yeah, unfortunately, this game is not on the Wii U Virtual Console. Neither was Dash, although I think that's for a very different reason. I think this one might just not be on there just because there's an alternative on the 3DS. Now, the Mystery Dungeon games are, the Ranger games are, so we'll have some more advantages there. But yeah, I guess that sort of sums up our feelings on the game itself, huh?
That's okay. Not every game has to be Rockstar.
Okay, I think that does it for our recording there. Appreciate everyone who made it this far in there, despite some of... We always have some gaffes on this. It never goes perfectly. You'll have the audio quality will be better on the podcast version because we do separate recordings, so any dropout you heard here should not be an issue in the actual podcast version that'll probably come out sometime later this year. Still no word on Secrets of the Jungle. We're still waiting. I was thinking, with the Katy Perry music video, I did notice that has a time travel aspect, with which sort of maps on the Celebi, and that it has a tropical / jungle setting to it. I have no idea. That may mean nothing. Obviously, given the current travel restrictions, it would have been much easier for them to fly to Hawaii than to the Caribbean, probably, or Latin America, given the current situation. Whenever that was filmed, late last year or early this year, most likely. By the way, I may as well just ask you, do you have any thoughts on that music video? Have you a chance to see it?
I actually haven't had a chance to see it, mostly because, when it first came up on my Dash, I didn't believe it was real. So that is something I had, now that I realize that this was actually a real thing, she actually is involved, I need to go watch it. But it also would not be the first time that a Pokemon trailer or release about a Pokemon movie has completely lied to me. So, as you say, it may have everything to do with the movie. It may have nothing. We'll see.
Yeah, that one was kind of interesting. It's actually the song itself is in a similar vein to "Making My Way," except that this one was presumably written for Pokemon specifically, unlike "Making My Way." But I did want to run that one by you because I think it came out maybe since our last discussion. They just released the CD version was supposed to ship on Friday for Electric. I have the digital version.
Cool.
Katy Perry I think is a little bit of a closer fit as an artist though to Pokemon than I think Post Malone was. But nothing personal against him really. It's lot of it. It's not hard to find people in their 20s and 30s who grew up with Pokemon and want to do music for it.
No,
not difficult. No. So
it's kind of insane that Pokemon has been getting some of these really big artists for the ending theme in the Western side of things. It's kind of exciting. Not that we haven't had some great singers of lesser known fame for themes in the past, but it's really interesting. They're throwing actual money behind us now. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I do wonder how all that came about. If it's just because of if it is tied into Secrets of the Jungle, if it's just because of all the insert songs there, if they got a theatrical distribution deal,
right?
Of some sort on that. We really don't know. Apparently, they're actually not doing a movie this year in Japan.
Makes sense. They've been really strict on a lot of things over there. Different in some ways than the U.S. has, but some of the things that I usually expect to see at various times of the year have just not happened at all, and it's oh, they're being very serious. Okay.
Yeah, I suppose. So yeah, I don't want to keep folks on too long, but I do want to give you a chance. There's a lot of stuff we could talk about, but thank you to everyone who came in for this. If you made it to the end of the stream, whether live or on replay, we always appreciate that. But look forward to seeing you at a future discussion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everybody.